Good afternoon, everyone. We are continuing with chapter number 3, Node.js modules. In first session, we have seen that uh, what is Node.js functions, how we can write that functions in Node.js, the structure of Node.js functions. Then we have seen the examples for function. Then we have seen the name function and anonymous function with their examples, how we can execute function without name. Then we have seen the scope of function, then higher order function we have seen, then examples of that function scope with higher order functions. Then we have seen the what is anonymous functions, difference between the name function and anonymous functions. We have seen the higher order functions, and now we are going to continue with closures. What is closures here? Here you can see if there is a function defined inside another function, the inner function has access to the variables declared in the outer function. That means if there is a function defined inside another function, that is, we have seen in some programming language like nested loops, nested functions, like this, function within function. Okay, so that is that inner function has access to the variables declared in the outer functions. The variables we are going to declare in outside or outer functions, that variables are accessible to that inner function. How we can see here, the variables in outer function have been closed by their inner function. Here you can see the example that function outer function, this is the name of that function, that is outer function with the argument. Here you can see function outer function with the parameter argument. Now we are going to open that curly brace, that means the body of the outer function includes variable, where variable in outer function, this is the outer function variable having value argument, that is that parameter we are going to pass to that function. Okay, then inside that outer function, inside the outer function's body, we are going to include another function, that is function my value. Okay, that is function within the function, this is the outer function. Now that function my value is the inner function having the body a console.log that will print variable in outer function. What it will print? Variable in outer function. Here you can see. That means that insider function or that inner function can access the variables from outer function. Okay. So console.log variable in outer function. What that variable in outer function consists of? Argument. That argument we are going to pass to that function. So after closing the body of that inner function, we are going to call that inner function here my value. Okay, without any parameter, we are going to call that my value function. What that my value function consists of? This body, that it will print that variable in outer function, that means the argument it is going to be print. After closing that inner outer function, what we are going to call? We are going to call that outer function with parameter or with argument. Outer function with argument hello closure, that is the string we are going to pass as the argument to that outer function. So how this code will execute? Here we are going to see this. Here you can see in Microsoft in Visual Studio Code. Here see this, we are going to execute this code. First create a file and like give name as like app dot or name of that file with the extension .js and execute this with the node.js. Here you can see output of this function is hello closure. Here you can see this. In this we have write the outer function, that is function having name outer function with the argument, and after opening that, here you can see the body of outer function consisting of one variable. That variable name is variable in outer function is equals to the value. That value means that argument, that is the parameter for that function. Okay, so after that, inside that outer function we are creating another function, that is inner function having name my value. Okay, so that body of that inner function is console, it's going to be print console.log variable in outer function. Sorry. Sorry, variable in outer function. What that variable in outer function is? It is the variable from outer function having value argument. That argument is to be passed for that outer function. After closing that inner function, we are going to call that inner function. That means it is going to be print that variable's value. Okay, so after closing that function's body, outside that function we are going to call that outer function. That means we are going to pass the value to that outer function's argument, that is hello closure. Okay, so that node.js will execute this code. First it will take this argument for that function, then for that it will assign that argument to that variable in outer function. In that, inside that function my value, it will print that console.log variable in outer function. Now the variable in outer function consisting of that hello closure. That means it will print that hello closure here. Here you can see. Okay, so this is the execution of that code here. This is the execution of this closures code. Okay, so we have seen the how we can execute that function defined inside another function. Okay, so the inner function can access the variables from the outer scope even after the outer function has returned. Here you can see if it is returned, then also we can access that variables from the outer scope. Here how? Why? Because the variables are still bound in the inner function. Variables are still bound in the inner function and not dependent on the outer function. Okay, so here you can see that function having name outer function with the argument, then variable, one variable is there for that function, that is variable in outer function is equals to argument, then return function. What it will? It will return function. What that function? Without name. That outer function will return the function without name, that is anonymous function. What that function includes? It is going to be print console.log variable in outer function. That means the argument is going to be print. Okay, after closing the inner function, close the outer function also, then variable inner function. Okay, that variable inner function is equals to outer function with the argument hello closure, then call that inner function. Here this variable now inner function act as a function, because that outer function with the parameter we are going to, that function we are going to assign this function to that variable, and now we are going to call this variable like a function. It is inner function. Okay, so how it will execute we will see here. Just I'm copying that code, and here here you can see that will print the hello closure. How? Here we will see that function, outer function with the argument variable from that outer function. Here you can see here, then return function. What we, this outer function will return that function anonymous function without name, without function name, that is the anonymous function. That function consisting of, that function will print that variable or the argument we are going to pass here. After closing that inner function and outer function, outside that function we are having one variable, that is inner function. Okay, so what it consists? The value like outer function, this is the function name. Okay, having arguments hello closure. So we are going to assign this function as a function to that variable. That means now this variable will act as a function, and we are going to call that variable like a function. So it will pass this argument to that, and it will return that function like this. It will print that hello closure here. Okay, so this is the example of closures inside the scope or outside the scope. Now next point is Node.js buffer. Node.js buffer. In Node.js, we can manipulate binary data with buffers. We can manipulate binary data with buffers. When working with streams and files, we work mostly with the buffer class. Whenever we are going to work with this, with that stream and that files in Node.js, we will work with that buffer class. Okay, so that buffer hold binary data that can be converted into other formats. Buffer holds binary data that can be converted into other formats used in operations to file writes or broken apart and resembles. So the buffer length property does not return the size of the content. Buffer length does not return the size of the content, but that of the buffer itself. It will return the buffer itself, not the size of the buffer. Okay. So here you see, you can see the example of Node.js buffer. Variable b is equals to new buffer. Buffer is the class with the buffer size. Okay. So variable b is equals to new buffer with the size. Variable string str is another variable, that is empty string. So here b dot write, its method from that buffer class. B dot write str, we are going to write that str to that buffer. Okay, so default that UTF encoding, there are some encoding techniques like UTF-6, UTF-8, UTF-16, ASCII. Okay, so by default it's UTF encoding technique. Okay, so what it will, after writing that string to that buffer, now we are going to print what we were going to print here, console.log b.length. Okay, so what it will print, we have seen here, it will not return the size of that content, but it returns the buffer itself. Here you can see b.length, it will print 1000, 10,000, sorry, it will print the buffer size directly. Okay, not the length of that buffer. Okay, so here you can see the above code generates the following is like 10,000. Okay, so another example is there, that code will return the byte length. How it will return, here you can see one variable b, where b is equals to new buffer with the size, then another variable str with the empty string. So it will write that b dot write str. It will write that variable str with that empty string to that buffer. Okay. So what we are going to print here, console.log str.length of that string. Okay, and console.log buffer.byte length of that string. Buffer.bytelength is the method from that buffer class. Okay, so buffer.bytelength of that string, it's going to print that length of that string. So we will see what is the byte length method here. Here you can see that byte length. See the byte length method. Here you can see the example of that byte length. Variable buffer is equals to buffer dot allocate 15. 15 is allocated to that buffer. Then variable, another variable is length, len, buffer dot byte length. Byte length for that buffer variable. Okay, so what it will print, it will print the length. Here you can see, we can run this example here. So what it will print, it will print the 15. Okay, here you can see we have passed that or allocating the size to that buffer. Okay, just wait for a moment. So see what is byte length here. You can see definition and usage of that. Buffer.bytelength method returns the length of a specified string object in bytes. What it will return? It will return the length of a specified string object in bytes. What is the format for, what is the syntax for that? Buffer.bytelength parameter, that is string, and encoding technique, that is UTF-8. Okay, so that string requires what it requires, that parameter string, and encoding is the optional. By default it is UTF-8 encoding technique. And then that string, it may be, it's a required field, it specifies the object to calculate the length of like a string, buffer, type array, data view, and array buffer. Okay, so what it will return, number of bytes in the specified objects. It will return the number of bytes in the specified object here. Here now, moving towards this. Here, what that string is empty, or if we are considering some string, here you can see the we are going to print that string dot length. It will return that length and the byte length of that string, okay, as 25, 25, it's vary depending on your what we can say, the technique, encoding techniques, okay. So next one is node encoding techniques in Node.js. Node.js supports all the popular encoding formats like ASCII, UTF-8 and UTF-16. These are the encoding techniques. So Node.js supports all this one. So to convert strings to buffers, call the buffer class constructor, okay, passing in a string and an encoding. We have seen that buffer class method like byte length. There are different another methods from that buffer class, that is toString, okay. So call the buffer instance toString method and pass in an encoding scheme to convert buffer to string. How to convert that buffer to string or string to buffer here? Here we can see the example. Here there is one string variable str is equals to having one string hello world from java2s.com. From string to buffer, we are going to convert the string to buffer using variable where buffer is equals to new buffer class, new buffer, what is the format, that is str. We are going to convert this string str comma in the form of encoding form utf-8. Okay, now using this we are going to convert this string to buffer. Okay, now how to convert that buffer to string? From buffer to string, use take another variable like round trip. Here variable round trip equals to buffer dot use toString method, that is toString. What we are going to convert that buffer to string, that is utf-8. We have converted that string to that this buffer. Now we are going to convert this buffer to string. So parameter for the toString method is utf-8 here. Now we are going to print that variable. That means that variable consists of now this original string. So we can execute this example here. We are going to execute here. See this, how we can convert this. See, one string is there, hello world from java2s.com. Now that means we are going to convert this string to buffer in one variable buffer having is equals to new buffer str comma utf-8. That means we have converted this string to that buffer. Now we are going to convert that that buffer to string. So that we are taking another variable round trip equals to what we are going to convert, that this buffer variable buffer to string, okay, to string, okay, from that utf format, and we are going to print this variable. So what is the output of this? Here execute this. You can see the output of this is like hello world from java 2s. That means after converting this string to buffer and after converting this buffer to string, it will print that original string here. Here you can see hello world from java2s.com. Okay, so this is the all about encoding in node.js. That means converting from string to buffer and buffer to string. For that use toString method from for converting buffer to string. Then here to convert a buffer to a string, use the toString method. As I said that use toString method. Here variable b is equals to new buffer with the size. Then another variable str having one string. This is the test like this. Then write this string to that buffer. This is test and print that b dot toString utf-8. So we will see the output of this. What this sample code will give the output. Okay, so you can see here what is the output for this. Execute this code in node.js. Oh, what for the node.js? So first we have to allocate the size for this. Okay, so we will see this example later on. Okay, so to append one buffer to Wait for this. Yeah, here you can see to append one buffer to the end of another, we can use concat method. Concat method for combining two buffers. Here you can see another variable b1 is equals to new buffer my name is. Then variable b2 is equals to new buffer java2s.com. Then variable b3. What b3 is doing here? Buffer dot concat method from the buffer class inside the rectangular bracket b1 comma b2. It will concatenate b1 and b2 here, and we are going to print that console dot log b3 dot to string. We are going to convert that buffer to string using that encoding format from to string from encoding, that is UTF encoding. Okay, so that this code will give output as that, like it will concatenate this two string b1 and b2, it will concatenate. Okay, so that's it for today's session. Okay, so we have seen that how to execute that sample code in the node.js, that what is buffer here, what is buffer, then encoding techniques. Okay, then closures we have seen. Okay, how to write function inside the function, how to access that outer scope, outside the, how to access that variables from the outer function in inner function. Then node.js buffers, how to convert that string to buffer or buffer to string using two string method of that buffer class. Okay, we have seen the examples for that. Okay, so that's it for today's session. We will stop here. Thank you.